Welcome to the Leading Conversations podcast, sponsored by the Excel Leadership Network. On each episode, J.D. Pairing will have conversations with church planting pastors and leaders from around the country. You can learn more about how to connect with Excel at the end of this podcast. Let's join J.D. now and listen in on this leading conversation.
Well, welcome to another edition of the Leading Conversations podcast with Excel Leadership Network. And today we are thrilled to have with us the great Dan Kimball from Santa Cruz, California. Dan, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, and from Sacramento to Santa Cruz.
How is Santa Cruz today? What's the...
It is somewhat sunny, a little bit cloudy, but the weather here is usually nice. So today's a nice day and the sun is out. But people, when they ever hear California, especially if you're not from California, we're not, as you know this, we're not Los Angeles, so we do have cold winters up here. So that is, but Santa Cruz is a beach town. The 1988 movie Lost Boys about vampires was filmed here. And that's my first hearing of Santa Cruz was through the Lost Boys movie.
When we moved from SoCal up to the Bay Area, I mean, Santa Cruz is the beach you go to.
Yeah.
Yep. Great beach. Water is freezing. So, hey,
yep.
Can I start? This is terrible. Can I start asking you about the hair?
Yeah.
Every guy I know from Santa Cruz, has a bunch of product in their hair. What is that about? Is that like part of being from that particular zip code, or is it surfing stuff, or is it just a cool vibe?
I mean, I tried surfing when I moved out here, and as you said, the water is very, very cold. Again, unlike Southern California, and I was afraid of sharks, just like I. So I tried it for about 6 months, but my personal hair, for those that can't see it, it's kind of like straight up on the top. It's kind of what's known as a pompadour, and it was basically from being in a rockabilly band in college, and I was into punk music, and my hair used to be about 3 times higher. I could pull it down past my chin, but I've had this since college in one form or the other, very much like this. So I wasn't Santa Cruz affiliated at all. It was, it was the music background that I kept my hair like this.
Well, I wish I could do that, but my wavy hair is waving goodbye. And I used to have the long, SoCal ultimate frisbee at UCLA hair, but not anymore.
Did you grow up down in Southern California?
Yes, I grew up there, moved to the Bay Area when I was in high school, but I went to UCLA. That's where I came to Christ. So tell us how you came to Christ. How did that happen?
Yeah, mine was at Colorado State University, actually. It was like 2 places. It was introduced to faith more at Colorado State University. I grew up in New Jersey, and Paramus, New Jersey, a city or a town, a suburb of New York City. And I didn't have faith. I didn't think about faith growing up too much. My parents, they probably would have said they were Christian. And I grew up in a very fortunate home, loving mom and dad, had a great scenario growing up. But there wasn't really any Christian, forced on me or anything. Both my mom and dad came to know Jesus later in life. But I think it's hard. This is actually important for if anyone's a church planter or just evangelizing in general. Little things along the way make a big difference. And when I was a teenager, I can remember in Paramus Park Mall, a guy came up to me and my buddy Ralph, and he was trying to witness to us. Now that I look back on it, and he shared a little bit about, do I know Jesus? And it was kind of like, I didn't know you could know him, because I saw Jesus more like a historical figure, like George Washington or somebody I didn't really know. But a couple of minutes with him left an impression with me. And then when I went to Colorado State University, and it was one of these, and I was very much into music. I got my degree in landscape architecture and urban planning. And I ended up, while I was in college, I picked up a little tract at a table that was left out, when they do these beginning of the year, all the Christian clubs.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
it was a tract that said something of the sort about Jesus being the only way. And I never thought about that before. It was very vivid to me because I remember looking at it and, just thinking, I didn't realize Christians believe that Jesus is the only way. And I was just thinking, is that American version of faith? Is it like what? And for whatever reason, I had nobody asking me to come to any campus group. I had no one saying you should be Christian. My friends weren't Christians that I've gotten a circle of friendships there. And it ended up being that through that little tract was so fascinating that I ended up going to a bookstore and looking at books about Christianity. And I had a pretty again, I think it had to be God because I'm like, there's a young guy, like, is this real? And I then started wondering and started reading and slowly becoming more convinced. I tried a campus ministry and I was in a punk band. And I can tell you it was like the absolute opposite culturally of what I would have fit in. I'm like, I don't fit here. And I didn't. They're a great campus ministry, but coming in, if you've never been in one, the music, especially, I just remember like, I got to get out of here. I didn't even stay for the whole thing, but I could not relate. And it wasn't their fault. They were just doing what was right.
They weren't doing a lot of punk worship
Yeah,
then.
no, correct. Yes. And then when I look back and it was a Lutheran church, I walked across the street from the dorm and that was like the opposite. Could not relate to the formality and the fellow wearing a robe and didn't understand the terminology. And that's what kind of kept me going into reading. And I guess just reading. And whenever you study gift mix, you find that there's some people that gravitate towards learning, and that was me. And a big moment, which actually impacted me for the rest of my life, was I had my friends saw me like buying books, and I got a Bible. And one time I came home to the house that we're all sharing, and there's a group sitting in the living room, and I could tell they were talking about me. I'm like, what's going on? And they just started sharing, we're concerned about you. We see that you have a Bible, you're reading a Bible and reading this other books they saw in my room. And they're like, Christians, they think they're waiting for the end of the world to happen. And I'm like, huh? And they started saying, we're worried what they're going to do to you, what you would become like. The girl I was dating at the time, she's like, you're going to lose all your creativity if you're a Christian. And I'm like, and then the word cult came up. 'Cause like, somehow they believe in this dead man that came back to life. If you're looking at it from the outside, it does seem really bizarre. Like, we believe in a dead man that died and 2,000 years ago. We've never seen him physically, but we believe in him. And one day we're going to spend like you start pulling yourself out and looking at it that way. But they were worried about me from a caring perspective. And I really remember like, how do I know they're not right? Is Christianity a cult? People that are in cults don't realize they're in cults, right? So it forced me to want to learn even more. That kind of compelled me. I'm like, I don't want to be in a cult. And make this story shorter was when we all graduated from Colorado State University, we moved to London, England to keep playing in this band that we had. And like, might as well go now. And during a year that I was in London, I was searching for a church. Actually, I take that back. I wasn't searching for a church. I was when I moved to California. I was walking by a church and they had a little sign that said, uh, Bible study inside. And it was a handwritten sign. I remember that. And I went in and it was about four elderly people. And I remember if I saw the group and I'm like, oops, I would have said, oops, sorry, wrong room. And the guy, I have his picture on the wall next to me here.
Huh.
He was 82 years old and he looked up and he said, here for the study. Like, and if he didn't say that with kindness, I probably would have said, I'm leaving. But the way he talked, he gave me a cup of Ovaltine. I remember, and I'm like, this is odd. Like Christians like Ovaltine. I didn't know. Like, and then and they took me under their wing and I started being part of this little tiny elderly community in London, England. And I was able to ask questions. He would take an hour. It took him to come into London from where he lived. He started meeting with me at another day during the week. I became the volunteer custodian for the little tiny church building. There's probably about 20, 25 people that went to and during that time, started understanding the gospel more and grace. And that's when I say I became a Christian, was in London due to an elderly church being faithful and me walking in, and they didn't judge me for my haircut or what I was wearing. And they were loving and kind. And that's where I would say I would then understood the gospel enough to make a firm decision. I now believe. So that's how I became a believer. And then,
That's
yeah,
fascinating. It's
that was
amazing.
in England.
Wow. And so
Yep.
how did you get to California then?
After England, because being a learner, after England, the band was ending. We had work permits for a year, the student work permits that were able to stay there. And then I'm like, I'm going to go to Israel. And I heard about kibbutzes and went to Israel for almost 5 months and kept reading and reading and learning. And then being in Israel was a great experience for me. And just like, I was reading through the Bible for the first time there. And then I traveled through Egypt and Greece and kept reading the whole Bible. And by the time I was done traveling after all of that, the bass player got a job in California, in San Jose. We're like, let's all move to California. So my brother and his wife and myself and another friend, we moved to California, ended up in Santa Cruz. And by that time, I knew that we're supposed to be in local churches. And I looked up in the phone book, pre-internet, and saw a church, Santa Cruz Bible Church, and the name was easy to understand. And I went there, got a job in San Jose, and working for as an architect, urban planning, and they did landscape architecture, a lot of the housing developments in the Bay Area, and um, and I started volunteering at Santa Cruz Bible Church, and that's how I ended up here.
Wow. That's interesting. What was your instrument in the band?
Drums. I got sticks
Okay.
right next. Yeah,
So
drums, and I still drum.
you still
Yep,
have
I
a punk
drummed.
band? You still have a
I
punk
got
band on the side?
no, but I have a drum set at home that I'll play punk music too in the headsets. So I do have my wonderful wife allows me to keep a full drum set in our living room. So I do have it, and I have to stay all neat and everything, but I do have a drum set. Yep.
What's the best punk band or the closest to what you were doing that we should all check out?
Oh, it probably would have been like the Clash. And many people don't know who the Clash is today, but to me, they were like the best kind of punk band there was. And you take the Clash, the Ramones, and you mix them with Johnny Cash and early Elvis, and that's what we were.
That's what you were.
Yeah.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. That's just everything is just nice and neat. You have such a typical testimony. So you're in Santa Cruz Bible Church. Was there
Yep.
a call for you to go into ministry? You're this landscape architect. I mean, how did that happen?
No, I mean, I always hear these, especially in denomination, what's your calling? Did you get called? I'm like, I don't think I was ever called. I think for me, it was everybody's called. I mean, like if you put faith in Jesus, you are then called to serve him in mission in this life, no matter what you're doing. And so for me, I, and if, and uh, yeah, and so I'm always like, I always find the division of like paid clergy hierarchy interesting because I see that every single person that puts faith in Jesus is called into serving on mission in this world. Now we're using our time differently and we're using our skills. And then some are freed up from working another job to serve in a local church, but we're all called. So I never see calling as a distinct thing from the church perspective versus the person that's working as an architect somewhere. They're called too. So, so back to the question, when I was at Santa Cruz Bible, I think God knew it. And the very first Sunday, the person that got up front, his name was Phil Comer, and he said, "We need a drummer for the choir." And I'm like, "Huh, I guess I'll talk to him." And I have Phil's picture. I'll show you. I keep right next to me. I know I'm on a podcast, you can't see it visually, but I keep these guys that were influential in my life.
Wow.
That's the fellow from England. That's my father-in-law. That's Phil Comer, and that was the president of Multnomah University that I had the fortunate time to meet with when I went to school up there. But Phil was a drummer, came to faith in his 20s. He took me under his wing and got me. And Phil is the dad of John Mark Comer. So if you know John Mark Comer, who's a was the pastor of a church in Portland that he started actually with his dad, and now he writes and he's doing a ministry about a lot of spiritual disciplines and faith formation things for John Mark. But he was a little boy, I forget, 9 or something when I met him, but knew the dad, and he took me under his wing, and he started getting me more and more involved in just serving as a volunteer. And I was commuting back and forth to San Jose in the architect office over there. And then eventually, again, I'll try to just, I was once asked, like, would you like to work one day a week at the church? And I'm like, so I ended up taking one day and I started being the youth director I'd never been in a youth ministry before in my life, became the youth director. And then over time, God was using the structure and the people we got involved, and it was growing. And so then they asked me to come on full time. And then I went to seminary, Western Seminary, which I'm now part of, and then stayed at Santa Cruz Bible Church for 21 years. Started a young adult ministry called Graceland that was probably 800 to 1,000 young adults for several years. And then we planted Vintage Faith Church 21 years ago out of Santa Cruz Bible Church. And that's what I'm still part of. But I guess going back to calling, I mean, it's a big topic. Here's what I know, and this is really fascinating today. And I know if you want to get into this at all, it's I think every human being is called to serve Jesus, whether you are a stay-at-home mom, if you are if you are a architect, if you are or if you're freed up from time to go into local church ministry. The early church had designated people because leadership is needed and even a hierarchy, so to speak, when things get more. But my calling was people need to know who Jesus is. I didn't know. I didn't know if it was a cult. My friends were questioning if it was a cult.
Sure.
I didn't know how to respond to some of their questions that they were having about Christianity. And then as I had the opportunity to read on my own, and then that little tiny elderly church in London, and then I'm like, I believe in Jesus, and now I understand the gospel more. And then I'm like, we got to tell people, like, this is such amazing news, and so many people don't understand this, and there's so many misunderstandings about Christianity. We got to do anything possible to share about Jesus to people. That's my calling, whether it was while I'm serving at the architect office, while I'm one day a week on a church staff, whether I'm young adult ministry, youth ministry, or now I'm serving in seminary. That's my calling. We must do anything possible to have Jesus known and the gospel and answer the questions that are the misperceptions about faith. And whether you're again a janitor or and then we're freed up. If you're on church staff, you're then freed up to use your time in local church ministry rather than working in another job. I don't even like saying the word job about church. We're serving him. It's not a job.
Right.
All right, it's talked a long time.
Talk just a little bit. How did the plant happen? What was the catalyst for that?
The catalyst for the church plant was we were at Santa Cruz Bible Church, and I was there when the church was 400 people, and it grew to about 3,500 people with the 800 to 1,000 young adults that I was part of. And it got to a point to where, I think we were wanting to, what's the best word? We were wanting to have more, I guess it's almost like we didn't plant the young adult ministry. So it wasn't that. We ended up planting a new church, but the lead pastor at the time and I were talking, and it was, how does this 800 plus young adult thing fit in the whole church? And there are lots of questions about it. And then he actually asked me, would you be open to planting our first church, plant out of Santa Cruz Bible? And I wasn't called to plant a church. I wasn't called. I'm just like, can we see more people come to know Jesus? How do we do that? Is church planting a way to do that? Um, and respond, and wanted to be up on the other side of town, up near university. So I'm like, all right, if we want to have people do that, and the senior pastor told me, he's like, we'll back you up and we'll do everything possible. And I trusted him. So we planted this church, and we were the first Santa Cruz Bible Church plant back in 2004.
Wow, that's amazing. That's great. That's if more churches were doing that, if we could grow from, I think we're trying to get to 16% of churches reproducing. I think right now we're about 7, and half of those are not on purpose. So that's a really good story. Let me ask you, how did you get into writing? Because you were writing books even before that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I went to the bookstore, so I'm sure it's part of who you are.
Well, it was actually, I mean, you're old enough to remember the Generation X, like Gen X, and what are we doing for Gen X? And you had the baby boomers and the Saddlebacks and the Willow Creeks of the time. And then you had reaching Gen X. And what we were doing at Santa Cruz Bible Church with Graceland, it was reaching Gen X, And so just through relationships, kind of like all of a sudden, we leadership network actually heard about what we were doing, I think through the lead pastor. And then I was invited to come into some meetings with other Gen X leaders way back. Mark Driscoll was one of them. There's a bunch of them that were kind of in that segment. And so it was Leadership Network that actually got us together. And then they were putting on events, and the whole thing is you have a large Gen X ministry that got attention. And so then I was asked by Zondervan Publishing to write. So I wasn't seeking out writing. I had Zondervan come up to me at a event that I was speaking at, and they said, would you be interested in writing about this? And so what am I thinking? Will this help people hear about Jesus? Will this be a way of breaking stereotypes and negative things or misperceptions about Christians? Will writing be a way to do that? And so I said yes, and that's why I started writing. I'm not a writer. It's a very difficult process for me. Zondervan has to hire a editor to read my writing and clean it up before it even goes to the first normal editor, because I'm such a terrible person with grammar and all of that stuff. So, but I never was called to be a writer. I'm called to keep that message going, and writing is another way of it happening. And then God has used the writing and keep using it. So that's why I've done that.
Yeah, well, you're quite prolific. What's your favorite book that you've written?
The favorite one that I've written? Oh,
Yeah.
oh boy. I mean, I think right now I'm writing one now called How Not to Go to Church, which is an apologetic for the local church. And probably the last one I've maybe it's still in my mind was How Not to Read the Bible, making sense of the pro-slavery, pro-violence, anti-women, anti-science sounding scriptures. Because what am I trying to do there? Break down the misperceptions of the Bible, of that there are blocking people or from faith. And the next one is How Not to Go to Church, which is, yes, there's a lot of understandable criticism of church today. So let's look at those criticisms and see which are valid, which aren't. What is the local church even? Even the word church, we use it so wrong. We use the word worship so wrong. We use the word church so wrong. We're part of the guilty of it. Like, you don't go to the New Testament and say, I'm going to go to church. And everybody knows, we all say this. We are the church. Be the church. Don't go to church. Or, but what do we do every single Sunday? Welcome to church. Are you going to church? We set up and always project it's this thing that you go to, right? And we all know, like, no, we're the church, it's the people. Then why do we keep reinforcing it? So, like, I can do my own thing during the week, and then I go to this thing called church where the religious activity happens and people do things for me, the pastors. Like, again, we fight about the word pastor. Nobody was called formally a pastor in the New Testament. And then there's all this very strange things that we do in churches where you have directors and pastors and they're really doing the same thing, but for some reason you have different titles. And I know there's reasons, but it's just so fascinating that we've allowed certain things to get in the way of that can get in the way. And then younger people get disillusioned by some of this stuff. So, worship, same thing. Worship is Romans 12, 1 and 2. I'm writing about this. So you're asking,
No, it's great.
I'm
Hey, we're
getting
getting a
off topic.
preview.
I'm getting off topic, but it's actually what I'm doing in the church book. It's broken down to what is church, when define it, and then go into some criticisms. But even what do we do on Sunday? If you're here on a Sunday, we have music, band, preaching. It's pretty normal, so I'm not against that at all. However, what are we doing with we say worship today, and it's, if I have this correct, it's like 98.8% of the times the word worship, as translated into English in the Bible, has nothing to do with music. It's about sacrificial life and decisions that we make as an act of worship towards God. Romans chapter 12 and 1 defines worship about don't being conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, because we're offering our bodies as a living sacrifice, not conforming to things. We're worshiping God by actions and decisions that we make. Sitting in a chair, listening to songs and having some dopamine make us feel excited. And I love music and what it does to us emotionally. I just think we're teaching worship incorrectly. And then we're teaching this is a whole other topic, but
No, it's great.
yeah.
What's the book coming out?
Oh, I'm gonna try to finish it when I've not taken sabbatical really ever, so I'm taking one this summer and I'm gonna work on it second half of the sabbatical. So probably 2026 time.
Good. Well, you can get How Not to Read the Bible,
Cool.
making sense of all the anti-stuff here, on Amazon and wherever books are sold, Christian books are sold, or in that bookstore in was that in
Fort Collins, Colorado.
Fort Collins, Colorado. I was the same guy. There was a Logos bookstore in Westwood where we'd all go down and just find something and devour it. Hey, you're a Mustang guy, so I need to ask you, how did you get into Mustangs? Because really godly people drive Ford Mustangs. So,
well, in high school, a buddy of mine, he was a year older than me, Bill Krupp. He had a Mustang, and he's still a mechanic. He was working on it, and I would just go over his house, and I really looked up to him. And he had a Mustang, and then I instantly was like, this is such a cool car. And so when I got a car, my first one was a 69 Mustang in New Jersey. And then when I moved to California, because it was starting to fall apart, I got a 66 Mustang. And that's what I still have today, which we talked about is right now in Costa Mesa getting restored. That I'll have back in August after it gets fully restored.
well, cool. Well, if you guys anybody want to buy a 66 Mustang convertible, let me know. I have one that might be for sale.
They're so nice. I mean,
Way overpriced.
they really are. They're so, I don't know, I mean, reading the origins of the Mustang's really fascinating. How they were, Ford was trying to come up with a way of coming up with a model that was sporty but cheaper, and everything from housewives, as they called them at that time, to, and having like a $2,000 sports car and how they designed it. Actually, I have the artist who rendered the first drawing. I have a signed Mustang panel. I'm sorry, um, glove compartment panel up there on my shelf where I keep
Wow.
everything. Yeah, so I loved learning about how they were even designed and what went into the original reasons why they did one. They showed it at the World's Fair in New York City in 1965,
Well,
64,
maybe
64.
you can write a book on how not to drive a Mustang. That'll be
Yeah.
after the.
I'm not to drive a must have. I'm not to drive. Yeah.
Hey, talk about what you're doing now because you're making some adjustments. What are you doing now?
Yeah. I'm gonna keep going back to like how I was saved, and I want to make people aware of who Jesus is, and sort through the confusion about who he is and what Christians believe. And then this led me to look, all the things we shared, and now it's like, how do we do it for church leaders? And I was fortunate to go to Western Seminary 20 something years ago when it was cheaper and it was a different world back then. And so I ended up shifting. I'm shifting my role to 3/4 time. It'll start in September. I'll be a quarter time at the church, 3/4 time with Western Seminary. And Western is committed to redesigning, like in cohort models, in the Bay Area through J. Kim and Westgate Church, and the rent, very minimal rent. We're able to lower the tuition by almost 50%, and through cohort model. And I'm right now passionate about seeing leaders who normally aren't able to afford training or too much of a commute, and don't want to do the online stuff, but in person. So we meet once a month all day in San Jose, and then on Zoom, and I curate them. And so we have two cohorts running now. One already graduated. We're launching a third one in the fall, and they have about 20 students in them. And so I'm focusing now on helping leaders get theologically trained who normally couldn't, and music leaders, children's directors. There's a lead pastor, associate pastor. There's some folks that work in the tech industry and they just want to study at that level. So a couple of non-church staff, but mainly church staff. Same motivation. How do we get people trained and know how to respond to the difficult questions of our day and explaining the true Jesus to people and the true gospel? Because there's so much there. I mean, we're a little younger than you, but around the same age. There's more confusion about Christianity than ever. Like, and it's compelling to say we got to make Jesus known, and then make sure we're knowing the things that we have to address, which are the misunderstandings of what Christianity and church, and that are even blocks them. And a lot of people abandon faith today, and the reasons are sad why they're even abandoning faith.
Don't
So
really have anything to do with God.
no, and it's
Relevance and tradition
understandings.
and
There are some people that don't. In fact, I'm talking about it this Sunday in our church here, that don't want to yield to God's authoritative will and what He's revealed in Scripture to us. And that's a decision that you have to make. If I believe in the authority of the Scriptures and I'm choosing in my life, I don't agree with that, then that's between you and God, and that's a reason of not belief. But so many people don't even know a lot of the truths, and they're rejecting God out of disappointments that He never promised, or misperceptions, or seeing things on all the media, all the bad stuff that happens, or think every church is a rock and roll giant church, and a lot of people just don't know. But I have hope, because when they do know the truth, there's more openness today. So I think in many ways there's hopefully a
yeah, people are
wonderful
searching.
time ahead. Yeah.
Hey, let me get you out of here on this. What's the leadership tip? You've already given us a few, but what's the leadership tip that's on the tip of your tongue right now that you want to say to the leaders that are listening?
I would say this applies to local church leadership. I think this applies now that I'm in seminary world. I'm a VP, and you learn all the insides of how seminary works. Um, in marriage, everything. It's like really is, it's the question of always making sure that people know the why of why you're making changes or why you're doing something. It's the Simon Sinek's why start with why. Start with why. It's really that. And I think, especially if you're a church leader or a church planner type, you'll probably want to move forward with things, but we really need to make sure everyone understands the whys behind anything you're doing and never assume they automatically know. People hate change. We all hate change. But we need them to know why there's change happening, or we can get scared, defensive, start disagreeing with something that they don't know the whys about, what's going on. So, and so that's probably the biggest thing I keep thinking about is don't assume people know the whys of what you're doing and why.
That is brilliant. We are recording this right before Palm Sunday, and I'm speaking on Palm Sunday, and I'm just fascinated by what Jesus tells two of the apostles, hey, go get that donkey. And if somebody asks you, why are you doing that?
Right.
Tell them the Lord needs it. And then they go and they do it, and somebody says, why are you doing that? And they say the Lord needs it. And I think one of the big questions we have to ask ourselves too is, why am I doing that?
You bet.
Is it security? Is it tradition? Is it confusion? Am I fear? But I just love that. And if you're leading, I think I know I assume too much. I assume, but you know why I'm doing this. You trust me. And they're like, no, we don't trust you. And we don't. So that's a great lesson. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't necessarily trust myself. That's maybe the wrong way to look at it. I might have certain things that I want to jump on or think is the right way, and I have my reason why, but I also need to make sure I'm correct in my reasons why. And that's why working with other people, I guess that's another one. Don't be a solo leader ever. Always make sure that you have others that are with you so you're not thinking of something that's not discernibly correct. Are you familiar with the Patrick Lencioni's Working Genius?
Yes.
Like that D piece, you can have the I, the invention, I think it is, or ideation, but then you need your discernment. That's the D, WID. And the D is discerning that these ideas are important. So the D kind of brings in a lot of the why, I think.
Are you a D?
I'm an ID.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm more of an I in invention and galvanizer.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'm assuming the why. So yeah, that's been very helpful. Wonder, invention, discernment, galvanizing
E
is empowering,
and then
tenacity.
Yeah, tenacity. Yep.
Good stuff. Well, you can get Lencioni's Working Genius on Amazon too, but make sure when you do, you pick up one of the books by the great Dan Kimball. Hey, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, hope I didn't talk too much. I was talking a lot about some of this stuff, but
no, that's why we have you on. Yeah. We want to hear you. Thanks so much.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks for joining the Leading Conversations podcast. We hope that you found it both helpful and encouraging. At Excel Leadership Network, our focus is on the church planter rather than the church. If you'd like to find out more about us, visit our webpage at excelnetwork.org. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. See you next time with another Leading Conversation.